The dark night of the soul and spiritual disconnection does not feel like a soft landing. It does not feel like the fertile nature of the womb of the Great Spirit. However, there are a lot of gems. There are a lot of gems down there, and that's exactly what it is. And if you're in it, it probably won't feel like that. And then after you come out of it one day, you will look back on it and be like, whoa, if it wasn't for that place where I was actually more held than I even realized, it would not have birthed me into who I was becoming. A lot of this doesn't make sense till later. The song Dark Night of the Soul by Loreena and McKennitt, I'll link that in the description. She talks about the night that was her guide. And something tells me she didn't write that song in the middle of her own Dark Night of the Soul, but after. So there is in mythology, in many different ancient traditions from around the world, different cultures have their own descent myth. They have their own descension into darkness myth. We have Persephone in the West that many people start to identify with during and after their own dark night of the soul. And I have a little bit of writing that I wrote down a long time ago, and I'm not exactly sure the source. If anybody knows, drop it in the comments. But it's talking about how we generally avoid the fertile darkness where our power is hiding. We avoid the fertile darkness where our power is hiding because there's going to be so much pain there. And it makes sense to avoid it until it comes to us and we're mature enough. Once upon a time, a maiden was given a map to descend down into her depths to discover who and what she's really made of. Her time to cross the threshold into this underworld came in the winter. And this path would be marked by the wisdom of all those who crossed before her. Her journey was hers to take alone, to discover her own innermost treasure through the unknown. Through descending into this inner underworld, she would meet her darker nature, her primal wild self, the guardian keeper of death, and all of the mysteries. Through this reunion, she would learn to trust and weave more of her power into this world as love itself. These descents would deepen her roots to receive the nourishment necessary to blossom authentically. So many people find themselves lost on the path of wild awakenings, a victim of external dark forces, powerful people, while avoiding inner dark forces, not knowing how to cross these thresholds of rebirth and turning against themselves, not trusting themselves, demonizing these inner allies that are actually here to help us awaken, heal, and rise graciously, being reborn again. Many of us are here to change this pattern and finally break the spells in our lineages that shame our pure primal wild nature and retrieve the full, whole, true beauty. We have arrived at a time in our story when humanity has now descended into a dark abyss. Many of us have experienced or are experiencing a form of that abyss in our inner life. Into the blackness of the mystery where all is coming undone to be reborn into a higher state. The feminine part of us reclaims a higher state of consciousness, reclaims the rightful place on the throne. We can fight this, or we can become the king or queen of this ushering humanity home to the wild awakening of which we all belong. We can fight this, or we can become the queens and kings of this. So there is a feminine nature to the descent. And I don't mean gender. I mean the surrendering the falling, the flowing, the trusting, the intuitive letting go that we associate with feminine spirituality. As we become more healthy and more healed and more balanced, we have that part of our spirituality, whether we're a man or a woman, happening when it needs to happen. And then we have like the masculine side of action and lightning fast decision making and manifestation going on. But we often run away, whether we're female or male in the body, from this feminine descent. We run away from this feminine descent. And it's interesting because in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, in like a more dogmatic version, people look at Eve, look at the woman as responsible for like the fall out of the garden, right? But taken a little bit more symbolically, a little bit more metaphorically, it's the feminine part of us that agrees to the descent on a soul level. It's the feminine part of our soul. It's that flowing, surrendering part of our soul that says it's time to go. And she goes down. And when she rises, the more masculine nature of her spirituality, his or her spirituality, will be more united in that holy alchemical marriage that we hear about. But this holy alchemical marriage of these two parts of our soul, this joining of these two ends of the polarity, can only happen in our spirit if a descent takes place. And it's not supposed to be a quick turnaround. This is the work of our life. For some of us, this is the great work of our life. It's why we came. We didn't come here to make a lot of money, to leave our mark necessarily in the outside world, although that can be the fruit of this work. We came here to do the great work and allow whatever comes from that to be secondary, whatever comes from that in the physical world and manifests, that's secondary to the great work. And integral to the great work is this great descent into the underworld. If you are in it, be resourced, be saying yes to whatever supports you feel drawn to, whatever therapies, whatever modalities, books, videos, music. Just don't hold back in supporting yourself. Don't hold back in sleeping too much. So much happens in sleep where our body, not only is our body rejuvenated, because this takes a toll on our body. This descent takes a big toll on our body, like with stiffness and pain and purging and fatigue and so many other things. So sleep as much as you can, not to escape pain, but to really allow the bodies, the physical body and the layers of your invisible body to rejuvenate, so that when you are awake, you've got everything in you that you can, and be delicate with yourself. Be patient with yourself. Learning our feminine spirituality, allowing it to do its thing. You don't have to do much. You almost have to just let go and surrender so that it can do what it needs to do, is some of our biggest challenges in this life. Whether you're a man or a woman, to really not be as productive, to not be as tough as nails, not as powerful in the physical world as we're expected to be, is really hard on our ego. And the dark night of the soul, many people have said this, the dark night of the soul is really the dark night of the ego, the small ego. It's the dark night of the mind, because the mind has realized that it could only get us this far. The small ego could only get us this far, and up until here, it does not know the way. It doesn't know the way of surrender. It doesn't know the language of spirit and symbol and metaphor. And so it's like a letting go and, blessing the mind, blessing the old ways of the small ego, and saying, I trust that the great spirit and the parts of me that have gone out ahead of me that I'm a little disconnected from, I'm mature enough to let go and let them lead me. even if I don't feel anything, even if I feel horrible, I know that it's temporary. I know that an incredible amount of people have gone through this before me and come out the other side. And there's nothing flawed. There's nothing wrong with me personally that I wouldn't also come out the other side if I follow in the footsteps of these ones who have made it. Yeah. Thank you so much for liking and commenting. I'm so glad you're here, and journey well. Hello, my name is Amanda. Welcome to my channel. I'm glad you're here. You're very welcome here. I want to talk today about spiritual desolation, sometimes called dark night of the soul, when your magic is gone. And we sometimes don't realize the magic or the connection we have to the universe, to God, to our inner voice until it's gone. And this can often happen after spiritual awakening starts. And we start to have a lot of signs or synchronicities or dreams or powerful meditations, or just maybe you've been on a retreat or a plant medicine ceremony, and things are just starting to wake up, and you're putting the pieces together that you're more than just a body. And then all of a sudden you plunge into great disconnection with all of that, sometimes for a long time, sometimes feeling as though all of that magic that happened, did that even really happen? We can get to some very low points. We can have very dark dreams. We can feel very distant from the people around us, from nature, if we've been very connected to nature. And no matter what we do, even if we do some really long or powerful spiritual practices, nothing really can pop us out of it. And it is different than regular clinical depression, which is also very horrible. It's like having regular clinical depression, but also a spiritual disconnection. So it's kind of like another layer to something that's already terrible. I'm going to pop a video in the description where I talk about my own dark night of the soul and navigating that. But I have a few thoughts to share when it comes to this topic. A lot of people go through this as a rite of passage on their spiritual journey after an initial awakening. I think it's not spoken about enough in the New Age. A lot of this is avoided in order to talk about things like channeling and like magical higher realms, and only focusing on that side of it. But if we're really going places, if we're really going deep into the self, we're going to hit spiritual desolation probably more than once. So whether you're in a classic dark night of the soul or just a layer of spiritual disconnection and desolation, this video is for you. Before dark night of the soul, things like psychiatric medication, alcohol, marijuana, lovely things in the physical world, like your friends, your family, maybe like having a baby, going on holiday, having a lot of money, success in your business. These things are wonderful or not so wonderful, depending on how unhealthy they are. These are wonderful distractions from your inner forces that have not yet been balanced. And a point comes where none of those things work anymore to bring relief or to numb or to distract you away from these inner forces, sometimes called inner winds that are not balanced. These inner winds have to do with our past, pain that's unprocessed, past karmas from this life or other lives. And they kind of like hang out beneath the surface until spiritual awakening, and especially until spiritual disconnection and dark nights of the soul. So suddenly none of that stuff works. And I will say to to give you a little bit of positive is eventually, after your dark night of the soul or a few rounds of it, none of those things are really that magical anymore. Although you can still enjoy the wonderful things of this life, and in fact they're sometimes more enjoyable after the fact. You don't need them because they're not causing you to run away from those difficult inner forces that are swirling around. You don't need them as an escape. You don't become addicted to them because you don't have anything to run away from. And that is part of why why we're doing this, so that we can have the ability to be without all of those beautiful things and to be able to sit with ourselves. And there's just like the inner winds are still there, but we're in control of those forces and they work for us. And if we want to still them, we can still them. And when those beautiful things on the outside come, they can come. When they go, they can go. But nothing really changes within our center. And in The Voice of Silence by Helena Blavatsky, she teaches that we must purify our nature in order to quiet and harness those forces and thus gain protection. So eventually all the chaotic forces and the pain and the past, unbalanced karmas, eventually those will actually be your protection because they'll be balanced, but they'll still be a force in your force field. So that you still have that momentum and power, but it's not in a painful way. There are 3 things I want to share about the dark night of the soul or spiritual disconnection that I wish I had known before I went through my first big one. The first is, it's not about trying to feel fabulous, do everything right, look great, keep your chin up and stay positive. It's really about getting to the other side. It's about getting to the other side with as much grace as you can, which might look like a lot of sleeping, a lot of time being alone, a lot of maybe reading or listening to sources that help guide you through and remind you that you're still you and things are going to be better eventually. We don't need to focus on trying to be perfect, trying to just like keep it together the way that we always do, because who we always are is actually being broken apart so that something new can eventually grow. So trying to keep it together is kind of futile. But making sure that you're as supported as possible with your environment, with your schedule, with the type of people you're spending time with is absolutely crucial. So it's kind of like this journey where metaphorically we're on this like river with a boat that's bouncing in the waves, and there's like mud and water falling in the boat. And when we're taking a difficult journey, it's not about keeping our hair perfectly straight and not swearing. And, it's about getting to the other side as intact as we can and working together with who and what we've been given to support us along the way. So we get a little bit more energy and help when we can start letting go of the need for things to be perfect and look a certain way when we're in spiritual disconnection. Number 2 is the initiation, the test is often about, at the end of the day, it's about believing in yourself. It's about believing that you've had an initial awakening and that it was real. It's about believing that you do have a place that is unique and valuable, no more or no less than anybody else in this universe, in this group, in this collective. And that you don't need to be somebody who is outputting all kinds of, counseling and art and writing and fruit, basically, in the outside world in order to have your place. Because the truth is, we don't need to be doing those things or anything in specifics in order to have our place. Our place might just be being still and being okay with knowing that we're just as valued in this group collective if we're just being still. I mean, if you think of a person at the end of their life, if they're in the dying phase, they're just in a hospital bed or a hospice bed or whatever. They're not really able to help anybody or serve or have like a big positive word or message for somebody else. They're really only able to breathe and exist. So it really has nothing to do with what we're doing on the outside or what we're contributing. in order for us to have a place. And that can be really hard as Western people, but it's an amazing initiation to believe in yourself and that you are a part of this, even when you don't feel connected to this. And initiations are really tests that happen in short times, or a lot of intensity that happens, but the fruit and the rewards of those initiations will go on for the rest of your life. So as much as we want to have the spiritual disconnection be over, the dark night of the soul to be over as soon as possible, it's going to stay for as long as it needs to get the work done. But you can be guaranteed that when it is done, everything that you would have learned in this terrible time is going to serve not only you, but this whole collective for the rest of your life, no matter what you do, no matter how much you do or don't do. So in my own big dark night of the soul, I remember I went to a plant medicine ceremony. I went to a retreat. I did like a really difficult water fast. It was one of the hardest things I've done in my life. And I kept expecting that if I just do some of these extreme practices, I'll be able to snap myself out of my dark night of the soul. I just need to go a little deeper. I just need to, add in this. And none of it worked. None of it worked. I kept trying until I finally gave up and realized that it really wasn't about me and my timing, me and my small ego's timing. It was really about me paying attention to everything and feeling everything that was going on along the way and giving up the control over how long it was going to last. So these are some of the most difficult tests of our entire life, some of the most difficult initiations of our entire life. So yeah, number 2, believing in yourself and that you do have a place in this collective, no matter how tough and how heavy this is. And number 3, it will not come until you're mature enough. The dark night of the soul, spiritual disconnection to great degrees, is not going to come to you until your soul can handle it, because we're getting this onslaught of really dense and heavy spiritual energy that kind of comes into our awareness from our unconscious. It's been in the background, and somehow your soul is ready to finally process it, to go through layers of pain and loneliness and heaviness and stuckness that a few years ago you probably weren't able to sit with and allow to pass through. So even though it feels like it's too much sometimes and it's difficult to know when it's going to end, and the mind can be really amplified, the inner critic and the brain's voice can really start to be very troubling and loud about it all. It only has come to you because you're mature enough to experience this kind of discharge and rebalancing and purging of old karma and old pain. And we can't get to where we're going. We kind of hit a ceiling if we haven't processed it, because the more subtle experiences, the more nuanced realms of reality are quite crisp and crystal clear, and require a lot of silence of those inner forces, silence of those inner winds. And if we haven't kind of processed all of this heavy stuff, we're not going to be a vibrational match for those places, those realms, those experiences, and the people, the wonderful people who exist there, the humans as well as the higher beings, the helping spirits. And so really it's all for us so that we can connect with the types of people and the types of spiritual forces and spiritual beings that we desire to. But we just can't take all this stuff with us, and it doesn't leave us overnight. It doesn't leave us quickly. It's not like a one-time deal. As much as many people in the spiritual community or the New Age community would like to make us think that we can do it like really quickly in a snap.